And of course, the big story that we are following right now, as we are learning from the IDF and Shin Bet that it appears they may have actually eliminated Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar, someone they have been looking to locate for more than a year. We know Hamas did attack Israel back on October 7th of last year, leading to this Gaza war, and Sinwar was the mastermind behind that. This is actually a post from Elan Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson, who joins us a lot here on Live Now from Fox. He said the IDF says it eliminated 3 terrorists and is checking the possibility that one of them was Yahya Sinwar. Now, I do want to bring in another friend of the show, Enia Krivine. She is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and joins us quite a bit and really has over the last year to break down the latest details. Thank you so much, Enia, for taking the time to be here with us, especially on short notice as all of this is playing out.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, so first off, for folks who are just joining us after 10 o'clock on the East Coast and 7 o'clock on the West Coast, can you explain overall who Yahya Sinwar really is?
Yeah, when I think of Yahya Sinwar, the word that comes to mind are evil genius. And evil because he has the blood of so many on his hand. This is a guy that was nicknamed the Butcher of Khan Yunis, not because of what he did to Israelis, but because of what he did to Palestinians. He was the guy that was known to have killed Palestinians with his bare hands if they weren't towing the Hamas line. Of course, Yahya Sinwar spent over in Israeli prisons for his role in the Second Intifada. It was a very bloody, long uprising of the Palestinian people where over 1,000 Israelis were killed. Sinwar was behind a lot of that terror and the buses that took the lives of Israeli civilians. He was caught by Israel, put in jail, and he spent 10 years there studying Israelis. And this is where the genius part comes in. He took it upon himself to speak Hebrew fluently. He studied how Israelis worked and what made them tick. He was handed back to Hamas in Gaza in a hostage deal that was reached about 10 years ago for the return of Corporal Gilad Shalit to Israel. And since then, he has been under the leadership of Hamas in Gaza, rising through the ranks to prominence again, where he was the mastermind behind the October 7th attacks of last year. And the genius of the evil genius, the sinister plan to steal and kidnap Israelis back to Gaza, which has been such a crippling and devastating blow to Israel and remains so today with over 100 hostages still in Gaza.
This is probably just a question that so many people can answer, but overall, I did want to get your take. How significant will this be if Sinwar is actually dead?
It's incredibly significant, and I'll tell you why. Because Israel has largely accomplished the military goals in Gaza. Hamas is no longer the military force it was on October 7th. Gaza can no longer be used as the platform for which to threaten Israel. But psychologically, there were 2 big accounts left open in Gaza. One was Sinwar's survival. This is a guy that could have restarted the movement. This is a guy that has become a personality cult. This is a guy that had to be taken off the table in order to turn the page there. And the other open account, of course, is the hostages. Sinwar was the person making the decision on the negotiations. All of the negotiations went through Sinwar. So now that he is no longer at the helm, there opens up a chance that Israel may be able to negotiate for additional hostage releases now that he is gone. And his hardline attitude, his intense desire to drag this war on and to keep it going, now that he is gone, there may be a chance to bring some more hostages home.
Is there a possibility at this point that Hamas just says, well, now we have a new leader and just moves on and goes about its business as if that didn't happen?
There is a possibility, but again, this is after a whole year of war. Hamas is not the force it was last year. It has been seriously degraded. And not only that, but Hamas's dream, Sinwar's dream, was that other regional proxies, Iran-backed militias in the West Bank, in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, and Iran itself would get into this war and finally gang together to inflict real damage on the Jewish state. Of course, that hasn't happened. And now what you see in the past couple of weeks is Israel going on the offensive. You have Hezbollah that's been the whole top leadership has been wiped out. You have Iran now waiting for this upcoming Israeli retaliation that's expected any day now with US backing. So really, it's not just Hamas that's on its back foot. It's the whole Iranian threat network that it's built over the past decade plus. Hamas was a big piece of that. Hezbollah was a big piece of that. And now they have been largely degraded by the IDF. So while they could turn up another leader in the next, in the coming hours, once it is determined that Sinwar is dead, of course, they haven't come back with an official announcement. They can take fingerprints of Sinwar. Those will probably be a relatively quick answer. Of course, he was in Israeli jails, so Israel has his fingerprints. And then there'll be a DNA test, which will take a little bit longer. But Israel wants to be absolutely sure about this because it is so decisive and so important psychologically for Israelis to know that this evil man is gone.
And I had an expert on just a short time ago, Javed Ali at the University of Michigan. I asked his take, and I do want to get your take based on your expertise here. As far as the attack on Iran, we've heard it's going to happen any day now. We've been hearing that for maybe a couple weeks at this point. But does this have any sort of impact on that? If Sinwar is dead, does that change anything about the retaliatory attack against Iran?
I don't think so for Israelis. I mean, Israelis have been very careful to make sure that these arenas remain separate, right? Sinwar's dream was that everyone attacked Israel at once. Israel's been taking them on one at a time. So it focused on Gaza intently in the first phase of the war. Now it's focused on Lebanon, and its retaliation against Iran is for the attack in which a couple weeks ago, in which Iran sent 180 ballistic missiles over Israel's major population centers. So Israel, I think, is very much looking to calibrate that response correctly, to try and restore a little bit of deterrence, but also looking at it as a single arena. In other words, dealing with the Iranians as appropriate given the attack of 2 weeks ago.
Hezbollah obviously has been a huge battle with Israel here. We've seen that develop, and the attacks have gotten more and more intense over the last several months here. As far as that fighting goes, has Hamas had a chance to maybe regroup as Israel is focused, of course, on Hezbollah?
So the IDF has had a problem in Gaza, which has been from the beginning, that Hamas, while it was the government, while it was the official, essentially, for all intents and purposes, become a military in Gaza, it is still a terrorist organization at its core. That is to say that Israel will likely be fighting Hamas as a terrorist organization for the mid to long term, and there's no avoiding that. Indeed, Israel's been fighting Hamas in the West Bank in a similar fashion for almost 2 decades. So there is going to be this continued trend of clearing areas and then having Hamas coming back and reforming. But here's the critical difference, is that when Hamas reforms now in Gaza, it doesn't go back to how it was previously. It is becoming a weaker and more ragtag force. So there's examples I've seen where the IDF has had to go into certain areas to clear it or to search for hostages. Now, a year ago or 8 months ago, when the IDF initially went into these areas, it could have taken weeks for them to get through to the center in order to achieve their goals, whereas now it's taking a matter of hours. So the point was never to eliminate Hamas. They were never going to get rid of every gun, every bomb, every terrorist. The point was to get it to a point where the IDF could handle it, and they would be more like a terrorist organization that they've always been, and no longer the force that they had become, where they were, for all intents and purposes, a well-armed military on Israel's border.
What happens next? I mean, at this point, we just kind of wait for that confirmation from the IDF. Do you expect, and you touched on this a little, but that we could get that confirmation today? Could it be several days? What do we know about that overall?
So I think that the fingerprint report could come back pretty quickly, but judging by some of those pictures, Josh, whoever it was that they found may have been dead for a while. So I'm not sure that they want to go just off fingerprints for something as important as this, for an announcement with this much gravity. I think they're going to wait for the DNA test, which I've heard can take anywhere from 24 to 36 hours. So I think that's what happened next. As far as the leadership, here's what my colleague John Shanzer has recommended, and it's by far the smartest thing I've seen on this topic, is the leadership, the remaining leadership of the top Hamas echelon is now Khaled Mashal, and he is based in Qatar. Qatar, who is, of course, a major non-NATO ally of the US, where we have a massive military base in Al Udeid. So now that if Yahya Sinwar is dead, big if, Khaled Mashal seems to be the heir apparent. If that is the case, then now is the moment for major pressure on Qatar, on the US ally Qatar, to turn up Khaled Mashal, to force him to surrender in the name of Hamas as the last standing leader, and to finally end this war, come to a deal on the hostages, and find a new path forward for finally rebuilding Gaza and bringing some relief to the millions of Gazans who have been suffering under Hamas leadership and under this war that Sinwar brought onto their heads.
I did want to ask, kind of going in reverse a little bit, because we've talked a lot about the hostages overall. And one thing that's been mentioned over the last year by a lot of folks out there is that Yahya Sinwar was likely surrounded by at least some of those hostages, essentially using them as human shields. Now, the IDF in their statement does say that there's no evidence that there were any hostages in that area. Is that surprising?
So that's one of the reasons that I think many people were doubting these reports. It seems unlikely, given what we've been hearing over the past almost year, it's just consistently since early in the war, that Sinwar was surrounding himself with hostages. What is the likelihood that he would have gone above ground to wage battle with a revolver or a machine gun or whatever it was he's holding in those pictures without this entourage of hostage, which he was presumably using as human shields, or at least that's what we've been told. So I have long had my doubts about some of these stories that have been coming out in the press. They're, universally anonymously leaked. We're not sure where these reporters are getting their sources. It's hard to know the veracity of these claims. However, if there are hostages in Gaza, the fact that if Sinwar is dead and the fact that he's been killed by the IDF will hopefully allow for new negotiations to take place under new leadership that would ultimately be the new arbiter of these negotiations on the Hamas side. And whether the hostages are, below ground where they found Sinwar or elsewhere in Gaza, I think the main focus now needs to be to bring them home.
All right. Enia Krivine there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Always love having you on to break everything down. Is there anything else that you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, thanks, Josh. So I think we've covered it. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here. And you are taking a live look right now. This is actually a different camera, but if we pop this up, this is over Khan Yunis there. We have these different cameras that are all over the Gaza area, and you can see at this point, we are still working to gather some more details after the Israel Defense Forces and the Shin Bet released that statement, essentially saying that they are investigating the possibility that Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar is dead in a strike there over in Gaza, an operation that actually appears to have been a ground operation. Now, there are some images that are floating around on the internet, as normally happens in this situation, but none of those have been confirmed as legitimate at this point. We are going to continue to follow this and bring you the latest as we do get it. But really quickly here, I do want to read that statement for you once again from the Israel Defense Forces. This is a joint IDF and ISA, which is the Shin Bet announcement. During IDF operations in the Gaza Strip, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of those terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages. The forces that are operating in that area are continuing to operate with the required caution. At this point, more details to follow, but We'll make sure to bring those to you the second that we get them.